Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to this Google Digital Garage training session, Build Engaging Presentations. My name's Kirsty and I'm a trainer for Google's free skills training program, Google Digital Garage. I'm so excited to be with you for this session today, Build Engaging Presentations. I absolutely love helping people work on their confidence, work on really being able to deliver something, whether that is, whatever that purpose is in a presentation, and to deliver it in a real confident way and know that they're going to be able to communicate with their audience. So I'm really excited to be here today. I'm not here alone though. You might already have said hello in the chat to us, but if you haven't, do go across and say hello, because in the chat we have ready and waiting our moderator today, Kira. So Kira is also a Google Digital Garage trainer and coach, and will be in that chat interacting with you, answering any questions, but also sharing some great links as we move through the material. So make sure you find Kira on that right hand side of this video in the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're signing in from and what is it that you're looking to do with presentations at the moment. Are you currently preparing for a presentation? Are you currently preparing for a demonstration at work, or maybe you're studying and you're looking to communicate your ideas to someone? Let me know in the chat, because that's really going to help me feel like we're talking, and I can give some examples and stories that are going to help you find what you are looking for today in this session. While we wait for a few of you to say hello and pop over into that chat, I'm going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, if you do at any point have any trouble hearing or seeing this webinar, try refreshing your browser. Hopefully that will fix any issues you might be having with any of the video or sound or anything that's happening on the screen. Secondly, if you would like to join in with that instant chat that I was just talking about, it should be to the right hand side of this video in the chat bar, or if you're on a mobile device, you'll find it below the video. So if you scroll down, you'll find that chat below. You will need to make sure that you're signed into your YouTube account in order to communicate with us. But remember, we can't hear you, we can't see you, but we can really feel like we're in the same room if we make use of that chat. I've already said Kira's going to be in that chat answering questions and sharing some really great resources as we move through. But I'm also going to pause for questions at various points throughout this hour together, so that if there is anything that you want me to ask specifically, then I can come to those in those pausing moments. Other than that, the only thing left to say is this is not a standalone session. This is part of a whole schedule of offerings that we have at Google Digital Garage. So I'm sure Kira can pop the link g.co/digital garage into the chat for everyone. Go and have a look at what we've got on there, what's coming up, what sessions that might also help you get into the place you need with the skills that you need for the workspace and beyond. And I can see Sharon, hello. I'm looking to improve my presentation skills. Well, you're definitely in the right place, and hopefully I can help you feel a lot more confident when you leave this session in the next hour. So that's the housekeeping done. I'm hoping that many more of you, because I can see there's a few of you watching out there, are going to let me know, say hello in the chat, what you're here for today, what made you sign up to Build Engaging Presentations. I really am curious. Let me know. Have you got a presentation coming up? How are we going to break this session down? We're going to split it into 3 really clear sections. The first section is going to be thinking about how we craft our approach. How do we start to create the structure, the story of how we're going to create whatever it is that you are going to be delivering or presenting? The second part, this is more manual. We're starting to actually look at some of those platforms that if you're going to build a traditional presentation with slides digitally, we're going to start thinking about, okay, well, how do we actually create that? What are some of the top tips around some of the areas we can build a traditional presentation on? And then the third part, which I must admit is my favourite part. We are going to think about some of those essential skills when it comes to presenting, when it comes to you, your skills, how you hold yourself, how you talk, how you communicate. So all of those areas are going to come towards the end as a bit of a skills toolbox to leave you with there. So that's how we're going to break up the session. Before I say hello to those of you in the chat there, I also want to let you know about this amazing opportunity for these free career certificates available from Google. Of course, we hope you find everything we talk about today as useful and as helpful as possible. But for those of you looking to potentially get into digital work, get into a new workplace, there are 6 training certificates ready for work that you can access via this link here. So write it down, and it is case sensitive, goo.gul/career cert UK. You can sign up for a free scholarship with Google. It's hosted on Coursera, and you can do a range of courses. I think there's 6 options, but some of them, just to give you a little idea: project management, UX design, data analysis, or data analytics. There's loads of options there, and you can choose which one you would like to commit to. So take that link down, and again, I'm sure Kira can pop that link into the chat for everyone, and make sure that you've got that to come back to and save later. But I can see a couple more hellos coming through there. So we have got Shareya. Hello everyone, I'm a student and I want to improve my presentations. I mean, perfect. I remember my student days having to deliver those presentations. Cindy, hi, Cindy from the west coast of Scotland. Welcome, Cindy. I bet you're cold today. I regularly deliver presentations as part of my job supporting startup creatives in Renfrewshire. I'm going to have to Google where that is, but nice. So looking to make them as interesting as possible. Yeah, great. And when you are delivering presentations, I'm the same. I always like to go and watch other people deliver and see, is there something that I can add to my style, or is there some kind of question that I can sort of use and mold it to work for whatever I deliver. So yeah, great work. Angelica, hi, I'm a student looking forward to also improving my presentations. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for your comments. It's really nice to see that you're there, you're ready to go. So let's jump in, shall we? Let's get going. Next thing I want you to tell me in the chat. When we think about presentations, I'm sure you could all give me a little bit of an insight into a presentation for you that was super memorable. So tell me in the chat, what was the most memorable presentation you've experienced? Where was it? Can you remember what they were talking about? But most importantly, why was it memorable? Is it memorable in a good way or memorable in a bad way? All of those elements. So give me some insight into some of the presentations that you've seen. And while you do that, I can see that. Hello from Norway. I'm a digital marketing student. I want to improve my presentation skills to present my new skills to a future employer or customer. Absolutely. And actually, all the skills we talk about in today's session are 100% transferable to those of you that are actually looking for interview skills, especially part 3 of today's session. Absolutely transferable. So tell me, what is the most memorable presentation you've experienced? Now, I can tell you one of mine while I'm waiting. When I was a student, our head of department at university was a bit out there. He was a character. And he would come in and he would, instead of reading texts or sort of having that traditional screen behind him at a podium, he would always do really physical presentations, and his lecture was the only one that everyone consistently turned up to. And I couldn't pinpoint a singular presentation, but his style in general, I can remember a lot of the lessons that we learned from him because of his style. Really interesting. So for me, that very physical, he would do demonstrations, he would get people out of the lecture hall, down the stairs to the front, and he'd start enacting anything that we needed to remember as key things for exams or assessments that we had coming up. So it was a really great sort of group of sessions that we had, and it was only part of one semester's sessions. And he will always, his style of presenting will always stick in my mind. But if you've got any, please do share them. I'll come back to them in the chat. But if there's any examples that you've got of engaging or non-engaging, maybe you've got awful experiences that you've done, that you potentially think, oh yeah, actually this wasn't good at all. The reason I'm asking this is because we can start to categorize the reason that we present, right? We can start to really understand exactly why we present, why we want to communicate with that particular audience. And we can categorize that into these three areas. We're trying to communicate. Maybe we've got an idea, we're trying to communicate. Maybe we're trying to persuade our audience to our way of thinking, to a new idea, or if you're in an interview, persuade them that we are the candidate for them. Or maybe we're trying to educate or instruct. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe we're trying to educate, instruct, but also persuade them to book us as a client. So there's a couple of categories that we can start to decide, why do we present? Is it a combination or is it a singular purpose? And it's really, really important to think about that. Sharon, a marketing strategy presentation on digital activation plan by a marketing consultant. The presentation was fun, lively, with videos and dialogues. Amazing. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of those sort of visuals. The more visuals, the less writing, the more you can actually connect and have that connection with your audience, the better when it comes to a presentation, because it really sticks in their minds, and it allows them to actually take something away. Now, I've got a presentation to show you, so let me press play here for you, and then we're going to talk about what we think about this.
What you're doing right now, at this very moment, is killing you. More than cars or the internet, or even that little mobile device we keep talking about, the technology you're using the most almost every day is this, your tush. Nowadays, people are sitting 9.3 hours a day, which is more than we're sleeping at 7.7 hours. Sitting is so incredibly prevalent, we don't even question how much we're doing it. And because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't even occur to us that it's not okay. So instead of going to coffee meetings or fluorescent lit conference room meetings, I ask people to go on a walking meeting to the tune of 20 to 30 miles a week. It's changed my life. You'll be surprised at how fresh air drives fresh thinking, and the way that you do, you'll bring into your life an entirely new set of ideas. Thank you.
What do we think about that? In a couple of minutes, this TED Talk presenter has managed to drop statistics at us that make us go, oh wow, what? I'm sitting down in the daytime longer than I'm sleeping on average. Mind-blowing. While also persuading us to potentially adapt some new habits. She says something like, next time you're in a one-to-one meeting, make it a walking meeting. Let your ideas flow while you walk and talk. TED Talk presenters, and for those of you that do watch TED Talks, I'm sure you'll agree, but those of you that haven't, I mean, there's so many available on YouTube. There's also a TED Talks app you can download on your phone, which I really use when I'm commuting, or I'm sort of not at a computer, or I don't want to go on YouTube. And the app's very, very good as well in terms of categorizing. But what TED Talk presenters do really, really well is they have a very clear thought to their approach, clear and thoughtful to exactly what they want us as an audience to take away from their presentation. And what's even more amazing with something like this, short, sweet, to the point, but still gets you thinking, she's not delivering with anything. It's just her on stage. And I think that's where we need to start. Because when we remember that it's us, we're the presenters. We are what our audience are interested in. That's where we can start thinking about how do we craft this presentation into a story. And TED Talkers do that very, very well. They know their topic, they know exactly what they want to say, and they know what they how and what they want to convey to their audience. It's not just about delivering a presentation, it's about telling a story. And stories, when it comes to presentations, are the secret ingredient, making a difference between a boring lecturer or someone that's and I'm sure you all experienced it over the past few years with COVID, where you've attended some presentations and they're just reading the screen and you think, oh, I wish they could just send me the slides, because actually I could have just read this myself a lot quicker than this hour webinar or this 90-minute webinar, and I could be much the same in terms of the information I'm taking away from this time here. So telling a story, and just like any story you would read, your story needs a beginning, needs a middle, and needs an end. So let's break down some of those story types. There's 4 clear categories of story that you can start thinking about. So we've got the origin story, and I'll read through it. Origin. I started my marketing business with a laptop in my garage, and now I have workspaces in 30 countries across the world. Things like inventions have really great origin stories. They focus on where they've come from, usually quite dire circumstances, and the person telling the story tells you about their hardship, what they've lived through, maybe loss of job, earnings, whatever it is. And it's that story of how they've got here, sort of inspiring to anyone that feels like they're in that zone as well. Then we've got future vision. My marketing business is growing and my goal is to have offices in 30 countries worldwide. This is the opposite to the origin story. This is painting that big dream or that picture of what could be, what is going to be in this vision. Failure or success. My first couple of attempts at starting my marketing business failed as I didn't have the right target market. I learned from my mistakes and now I have offices in 30 countries around the world. So failure versus success, we're starting to think, okay, what lessons have we learned? What have we had to have happen to us as the narrator to achieve a certain outcome? And that's what we're trying to bring our audience on board to go, okay, so you've got that credibility of really not a straight line up. Realization story, all about problem, all about solving a problem. I've been in the finance industry for 15 years when I went to a talk on marketing strategies and realized that I wanted to start my own marketing company and expand into many different countries across the world. The realization story is usually what you'll find people on panels sort of using as a story type. They were stuck in a certain lifestyle, something that they didn't want to happen. They've solved that problem for themselves with a realization or a eureka moment, a light bulb moment, to go, actually, this is what I need to do. And they're telling us about it. They're inspiring us with their realization story. So there's 4 different areas there that we can start to think about. Now, if I said to you, a budget report, if you were delivering a budget report with your team, with your wherever you work, or maybe you're working on a project at uni and you're looking to do some kind of report on things that you found, and you've got a budget, what kind of story type out of those 4 stories might you use to show where you might not have done so well, what you can focus on in the future, how you can move forward? What kind of story type out of those 4 stories might we use for a budget report? And while you're answering in the chat, I'm going to do the other 2. So company update, if we've got new starters, we want to make our story interesting. So maybe something like an origin story could work quite well, especially if there's new people at the table. They can understand exactly what that company origin is about, why we're here, and then move into any of that agenda that we need to speak about in the company update. Something like an ideas pitch, a vision story, right? This is where we envision, but sometimes actually a combination of a vision and a realization story might work. This is where I was, I realised this, and now I envision this, to really get people on board. Now, I can't see any answers coming through for the budget report. What do you think? If I wanted to do some kind of budget report, what type of story do you think I would need, or I could use, out of the 4 we've just talked through? Origin. Is it origin? Is it a future vision story? Is it failure or success? Or is it realization? And I will keep an eye out on that chat and I'll come back to it. But let me know, which story type do you think for a budget report? And while I am here, while I'm looking, Cindy, a presentation when the presenter got very emotional and slightly tearful, thinking about what her motivation was for starting her business. And that was a good connection with you, right? So yeah, I mean, that is a realization, right? This is what helped me. And look how that worked for you and your connection. Sharia, a digital marketing presentation one of our professors gave us. It was memorable because of the visuals, words, and his body language attracted me a lot. Yeah, nice. Cool. Cindy, failure/success plus future vision. Absolutely, for a budget report. It could be a combination of those two. We might use that failure versus success to go, right, we've done this, we've done that, this worked, this didn't, this is what we've learned, this is what we envision with our goals for the future. Thank you so much, Cindy. So when it comes to our presentations, number 1, what is your goal? Yes, Sharia. So that combination with the future vision, absolutely. So when it comes to planning, what's the goal? We don't want to ramble on. We don't want to bore people. We want, before we even put pen to paper or mouse to screen, we want to know exactly what our presentation is about. What's the goal of our presentation? What do we want our participants, our learners, the people in front of us, what do we want them to do when they attend our presentation? So number 1 of your planning, what is the goal? The next thing, write down exactly what you want them to think. Out of all the information they're going to obtain from your influence, what is it that you want them to think? Do you want them to be inspired? Do you want them to leave that room feeling educated and informed? Do you want them to be persuaded to invest in you? Depending what it is, what do you want them to think? But not only what do you want them to think, when do you want them to think it? During your presentation. Remember, beginning, middle, and end, crafting a story. We can make those real poignant moments stick. Same with emotion. When do you want them to feel? What do you want them to feel? How can you build that connection with your audience strong enough so when they finish with you, they feel exactly how you intended them to feel from the content in your presentation? And we don't have to have a formal presentation, as we'll talk about in a moment, to really connect with someone when we're delivering a talk or a formal presentation. So when do you want them to feel? And finally, what's the one thing you want them to take away for that whole presentation? What's the thing? A lot of people, when they watch the presentation, they'll really enjoy and engage for the whole hour. But actually, as humans, we're only going to retain certain elements, certain facts, certain figures, certain sentences, some more than others, granted. But people are going to forget, a lot of that in-between content. So refer back to your goal, refer back to what you want them to take away multiple times. Focus on really sticking to what you want them and need them to know as an audience. And think about those TED Talk presenters, really clear, straight to the point, and actually only a couple of minutes long. But I'm going to sneeze. Bless me. But they really can allow us to start to be more active. As an example, for the one we watched in our day-to-day lives, it's inspiring, right? When it comes to the structure and the flow, Like I said, every presentation, like a story, is going to have a beginning, a middle, and end. So you've got your beginning, your background, which is the start of your story. This is where we are going to let them know what we've identified, some of the most relevant points. Like today, we told you how we're going to break up this session, what it's about, a bit background. Then you've got your problem and your solution. And it's up to you how you split that up. So this is the problem, and this is what I'm suggesting as a solution. And we've got our third part, which brings us to the conclusion. How are we going to finish? We need to end strong. Are we going to have something that's provocative, a statement that's going to really hit home? Are we going to ask for questions? Are we going to give any handouts out? What's the ending to our story? And along the bottom there, that flow, that plan. What's our research telling us? Really, really important for us to start to identify exactly what is relevant to the presentation we're creating. Really, really important. Before we actually start getting into creating a presentation, writing it, designing it, however you're going to be delivering, we need to research and we need to plan. Then we can design. Then we can make it look good or sound good, depending on how you're delivering. Remember, we're telling a story, but take it further. We're telling a story for our audience. So those of you that are in marketing, because there was a couple of you that said, I'm studying marketing. Perfect. You'll understand this, because any presentation is just like when you're creating a campaign or when you're creating a social media piece of content for your social media. The number one rule is understand your audience. And that is the same for a presentation. Engage your audience by creating, and I at the beginning of this session, what was the first thing I asked? Tell me why you're here. Because then if I know, right, I've got a presentation coming up, I know what stories I can craft to make this presentation as useful as possible for you as an individual. Do I have any questions coming up? Let's have a look. If you do have any questions, please do get them into the chat. Kira is there, don't forget, in the chat, ready and waiting for questions. And I have got 2 more pausing for questions as we move through. We've got just over half an hour left together. So let's have a look, shall we? Let's jump into section 2, because I can't see any questions so far. Okay, so building effective presentations. So remember, we've done our research at this point. We start to structure it. We start to plan it. Next step, are we going to use any tools? What tools are going to be most relevant for us when it comes to us telling our story and delivering a presentation in the most effective way? So when it comes to the design part and it comes to choosing the tools that we're going to use, start to answer some of these questions. And we're going to break these down one by one, but some of the key things to think about: the audience, size, location of your audience. Are you in person, remote? What's the message you're trying to convey? Have you got that down? Do you understand exactly what you're trying to talk about? And then we can start to think about the tools or the technology that is available or will be available to you to deliver to that particular audience. So when it comes to the technology, to slide or not to slide, that is the question. Slides are not mandatory. We've just seen a great example of a TED Talk where our presenter stood on stage with no slides on their own, and it was still engaging. So slides are not mandatory, but they are an option for you. Before I jump into a little bit of a demo of Google Slides, there are loads of options that you can use that are not necessarily just slides. Mural. Maybe you're doing a remote meeting, a budget report meeting or a presentation where you want something that's a little bit more collaborative or something that is a little bit more communicative for your group. Mural is a great tool, and also you get a number of kind of no-cost free options with Mural as well, so even better, right? And it allows a group, as long as whoever owns this Mural board gives access via email to anyone in the room or the virtual room, everyone can individually put sticky notes on there. We can answer questions. We can start creating ideas. It's a real visual way of hosting some kind of presentation or some aid that you might use in certain circumstances. Is actually one of my favorite tools. Canva, I'm sure a few of the marketers in the room here have heard of Canva, but there's loads of templated options that we can start to either gather inspiration from or completely use from Canva for either our slides, but also maybe for visual things that we want to put up in the room, handouts, posters around the room that we want to get people to draw their attention to. Then we've got Slido. For those of you that haven't heard of Slido, Slido is an interactive tool that you can use to do things like polls, questions, and everyone in the audience can access it from their phone, or if you're virtual, they can open a new tab and actually access it from a tab in their browser. So again, a real nice interactive way that you can use in a face-to-face environment, but also in a virtual environment as well. Or maybe you're going to use no other aids at all. It's going to be you and your talk and your presentation and your story. But you might decide, I'm going to deliver with a presentation. It's going to be me. I don't want any other aids. I want my slides and I want to be able to work through them and take my audience on a journey. That's fine. So now we need to choose our tool. Now there's loads of different options. There's not just Google Slides, which is what we're going to talk through today, because of time, and also because it is very, very compatible with other skills that you would use for some of the other programs. So we've got Google Slides, first option, but you've also got Microsoft PowerPoint. Now, if you don't have a paid for 365 version of Microsoft, there is a cut down version of PowerPoint that you can download online for free. So you can use PowerPoint still even without that paid for license. There's Prezi, Prezi. Now Prezi is a little bit more of a creative tool. So rather than a linear next slide, Prezi allows you to sort of investigate some of the points, and it's very visual and animated. So that might suit some of you really, really well. And then those of you that are on Apple devices, you've got Keynote. So there's some of the top tools that you potentially might use or choose to create slides. There are a few differences, but those key linear ones, so Google Slides, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Keynote, have very, very similar processes to create slides, to add content, very similar toolbars. So we're going to start by walking through Google Slides. Now, Google Slides is a presentation editor. It's part of that Google Workspace suite that you can access once you've got a Gmail, either a free Gmail or a business Gmail. It's really great for collaboration. It backs your work up quickly, so it automatically saves. You've got a revision history, and as long as you've got Wi-Fi and you remember the login to the email it's connected to, you can access that presentation absolutely anywhere as long as you've got Wi-Fi. So great option for us to build a presentation. With Google Slides, just like with Keynote and Microsoft PowerPoint, we can choose a theme. We can customize how that presentation looks. You can also import a theme. So if you've got a theme from somewhere else, those of you that are a little bit more techie and feel confident doing that, maybe you've built your own theme, or your organization has provided you with a theme, which sometimes happens, you can actually choose a theme to make sure that all of your slides have a feel, they have the same background, they're using the same font, the same text, and it's consistent, which really is important when you're using slides. But if you've got a theme, say here, you pick one of these already created themes on the right-hand side, you don't have to stick with the formatting that theme has. What you can actually do is edit what we call the master slide, and this is how we do it. So first of all, we go to Slide at the top of the menu. We're then going to go down to Edit Master Slide, and you'll see this screen here. What this will allow you to do is click that very top panel on the left, and anything you change, you can see that it's the main titles, first level, second level, in terms of those bullet points. You can then change all of those fonts, the size of those fonts, anything you want, and I will just press play on that again for us. You can change anything you want within that master slide, and once you have changed it, so you can see slide, edit, master, click in that top left slide, the white one, click on the bit that you want to change, whether that's font like our example here, and once you've chosen the font, so they've gone for impact, we need to make sure we press that cross in the top right hand corner, and you can see now throughout that whole theme all of those main titles will have changed the font to keep it consistent. So that's a nice quick way that you can keep your theme consistent over the whole presentation. Now this might look familiar to a lot of you. This is the toolbar. Now if you've ever used any word processing software, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, anything, you'll probably be a little bit familiar with this toolbar. In terms of some of the differences with Google Slides, the top right, you'll see this yellow box with untitled presentation. This is where we actually name our presentation, is in that top left. Because it saves automatically, we don't need to press save as and give it a name in that way. We just name it in the top left of the toolbar. Underneath, you've got your add the text box, add image, add shape, so you've got all of those usual symbols there. To the right of that, background, layout, theme, transition. This is where we can edit the actual slides themselves. So we've got background. If you want to change the choice of background within the theme that you've chosen, you can change it that way. You can change the layout. So within different themes, you have different layouts. Some have maybe a title with a bullet pointed list, whereas some will have a title and a space for a big image. So maybe you want a different layout for that particular slide. So you go into layout and then you can select which one you want. Maybe the theme just isn't right, so you can actually change the theme from here. And transitions, when we press next, now I'd say don't go overboard with these, but when we press next between our slides when we're in delivery mode, this is where you can add a transition. Remember at school when we used to have spinning slides, spin away, and maybe a simple fade for professional presentations might work totally okay. And then on the right, top right there, with Google Slides, this is how you deliver your presentation. You've got two options. You can either just press present if you have no speaker notes and you haven't been using the speaker notes, or you can use the little arrow to the right hand side of present, and then a pop-up comes up and you can actually deliver in presenter mode, which will give you your speaker notes as a separate window. So practice using some of those options in the toolbar and make sure you're comfortable before you actually have to deliver. The next things to think about in terms of what's actually on your slides when you're building, what's going to get you them hooked from the beginning. Have you got a title that is impactful, and does it relate to the goal of your presentation? So when you're thinking about what you wanted to achieve and you were planning this presentation, does the title link to that directly? From a few words and your audience are waiting for you, can people tell exactly what they're going to get from your session? Really, really important. And as you move through, too much text on the slide, and we've already said from your examples in the chat, a lot of you said it was really visual, you know, that he didn't just talk at me with this presentation, or this professor didn't leave me with just reading slides. They were engaging, they were telling me a story. Absolutely, right? So the same with the text on the slide. Too much text can be overwhelming. Can you create really clear bullet points, whether they're visual like what you can see on the screen here, or whether you have some text and you arrange that screen so people can concentrate on you, what you're saying as the presenter, rather than looking behind you sort of trying to squint their eyes if they're in face-to-face and trying to read, or just switching off completely in a virtual zone where they might as well turn you down because they're just reading your slides. So really understand. And then also in terms of font, make sure that your font is clear. Think about the size of your text as well. For those bits that are on your slides, are they readable for everyone that is going to be looking at those slides that you've created? The first point on this slide, there's no magic number when it comes to how many slides. There's absolutely no magic number. But think about the time you've got to deliver. If you've only got an hour to deliver a presentation and you've given yourself over 100 slides, potentially that's too much because you haven't even got a minute a slide there. So start to think about, again, when you're planning and you've created that structure of your story, those important questions: what do you want them to feel? When do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think? And when do you want them to think it? Is going to impact the pace. It's going to impact where you might need to spend 2 or 3 minutes on a slide versus a 30-second slide that's just got one point on it. So varying what you've got. Which brings us to that fourth step: vary your content. We don't want it all to just be text. Have you got images? Have you got charts? Have you got illustrations that are going to back up the point? Again, it's about the focus is on you as a presenter. And if you are using stats as a side note, make sure you're referencing those. And if someone asks you where you've got that from, you know exactly where it's come from and it's from a credible source. And finally, I have touched on this briefly just then, but change your pace. Don't be afraid to have a slide that's a little bit more bare with one thing on it that is a focus point of your presentation. And then you have a slide like this that has a few more things on it that you can walk through systematically. Final point before we pause for questions, and if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat because I'm about to pause again. If you are delivering something online, there's a few extra things to be aware of. Can you screen share? Do you know how to do that? Can you do that confidently without messing around with your screens? Can you do that in a way that nobody's going to be like, oh, and we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been in meetings over the past 2 years where someone can't share their screen and you're waiting around, you're like, oh, is this presentation going to happen? Oh. So avoid that and make sure you've practiced before. And sometimes it's different depending on what software you're used to using. Maybe you're always using Teams and this presentation is going to be on Zoom. Make sure you know exactly how to use that for Zoom. Make clear decisions when it comes to things like video for participants or microphones for participants. Depending on the style of your delivery, are you going to allow all of the people watching you to have their videos on or use their microphones? Is that the style you want to go for? Or are you going to go for something like what we've got today, where we can communicate with you in the chat? Which brings us to that third point. If they're not having videos or microphones, how are you going to have that live audience participation? Is that something that you want? And if it is, how are you going to set out those rules at the beginning? I did that today, remember? Tell me in the chat. I can't see you, I can't hear you, but I want to have a conversation with you. Talk to me in that chat. So set those rules clearly so everyone in that audience knows exactly how they can communicate with you. And a couple of other things to consider when you're delivering online: ease of use. Is the platform easy to set up? Is it easy for the learners or participants to join? Is it easy to use as a whole? And does it cost anything? Does it cost you anything? Are you going to need to then charge a fee for the people attending in order to cover those costs? Weigh it up. I mean, there's a lot of no-cost options out there that you could potentially use. So start to think about what's going to work well for you in a virtual environment. Which brings me to the pausing for questions. And we've got just over 15 minutes left together for my favourite part that I'm hoping a lot of you that are here today are going to really, really enjoy to finish off all the great things we've been talking about so far. Now, I can't see any questions, but again, I've got one more pausing for questions at the end. Kira's there, ready and waiting for questions. So please do, if you do have anything you want to ask, pop it in the chat and I will come back to it in the next pausing for questions. So the final part to finish up today's sessions: boosting our actual presentation skills, those presentation techniques, the skills that we need in order to deliver an engaging and effective presentation that can land no matter who is in front of us. A successful presentation needs more than just traditional slides, a consistent structure. It needs more. It needs the humanness, if that's a word. Gestures, facial expressions, eye contact if you're in a room with them, delivering in a certain way with your voice, conviction. All of these things are super, super important. Remember, the audience is there to engage with you as a presenter, not a slide deck that you're going to press next on. So what kind of a presenter are you? Ask yourself that question. Ask yourself, am I happy? Am I cheery? Am I serious? Am I professional? Am I corporate? There's all different ways and no way is wrong. Really, really important. Your style might suit a particular environment and you might have to work harder in other environments. That's normal. My style of presenting, as an example, is very conversational. I'm very animated. I'm very talky. I'm kind of colloquial. I like to have a conversation and a real connection. In some scenarios, I have to rein that in. I'm still me. I'm still giving that energy, but maybe in a more corporate environment, that's not going to work for me straight away. I need to build the trust before I can be that animated in front of certain people. Or maybe I've got an audience that are shy and my animation actually scares them off. They don't want to ask any questions. So starting to think about your style and how can you really start to hone in on that. And if you're sat here today thinking, oh, I get nervous. I mean, tell me, actually, because I haven't heard of you for a while, give me an emoji in the chat if you get nervous when you have to present. Give me an emoji in the chat. I'll wait to see some of those emojis. And you're not alone. And this is what I want to show you. I mean, I get nervous. I get nervous whenever I'm presenting every time. And I have a little system for myself. I do some star jumps before I present. I get my energy up. I get the nerves out. And when I'm really nervous, I get a froggy throat noise that happens, and I can't explain where it comes from because it doesn't do it any other time. And it does this weird like when I'm trying, what's happening? Don't worry about it. There's certain things that we can practice to control them, and our nerves are pretty good. I'm loving the froggy emoji. There's certain things we can practice, right? Think about a kid picking up an instrument as a young person. So they pick up their instrument for the first time. Let's go for violin, because that's a particularly difficult one, right? They pick up their violin. They're like, look, adults, look how good I am at the violin. What do we hear when they first start? They're no Mozart, right? Squeak, squeak, squeak. But over time, with commitment and practice, they have this muscle that starts to build up mechanisms to get better at that skill. And presenting skills are no different. Absolutely no different. Confidence actually is no different. Battling those nerves in the way that works for you is no different. And it is something to be conscious of. So when I'm nervous, what happens to my body? What tics happen? Do I giggle, which is a common one? Do I get the froggy throat, like Kirsty? Do my knees shake? What happens to me? That's the first point. Okay, what can I do next time to make that a little bit more manageable? Maybe I need to be more prepared. Fine, I need to practice more. Great. Maybe I need to work on giving myself the right energy, so breathing before I present. Or maybe you want to do star jumps like I do. Like I said, I am quite an energetic presenter. So the star jumps really work for me because they get rid of the nervous stuff and they leave me with energy, ready to go. Even confident speakers that you're looking at, it's not a natural gift necessarily. Loads of people have that idea of, but they're just naturally great at speaking to people. They're just good at presenting. Like, no, that person will have had to have practiced in some form, some way. So start thinking about what kind of a presenter you want to be, because we can start improving straight after this session. Straight is when you finish. And I can see a couple of things coming through. I start jumping from one subject to another one. Yeah, I feel you with that, Lucy. Slightly nervous, but get a buzz from it. Yeah. And that's the good kind of nerves, right? When you can get your nerves to a place where they're not taking over and preventing you from doing your best job, but they're in control and they're giving you the push to really do the best that you can do. So nerves can be great, and it means you care as well. Mary Portus calls it a goat voice. I have to have a look at that, Margot. Nice. Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Sharon, I start to blabber on. Sharia, if I get nervous, I start fumbling. Yeah, see, all of these things are not uncommon at all. Lucy, I need to know the presentation by heart. It makes me feel more comfortable. Yeah, preparation is absolutely key. I find that for myself as well. If I'm confident in what I'm talking about and there's been no last minute changes, I can really put myself in the right mindset to use any nerves I do have to deliver in a more confident way. Amazing. So you're not alone. Look at all the other people that are feeling similar things, right? So the first thing to start thinking about, your audience. Who are you presenting to? And how many are you presenting to? What's the difference between one person versus a group of people? And actually, once you get past the nervousness of, oh, there's all these people in the room, there's no difference. There's no difference mentally. When we can move past that, it's a human connection. The differences are physical, especially if you're in a face-to-face environment. If you have loads of people in a room versus one person, the main difference is that you have to move more. You have to look around the room more to make that. You have to work harder to make those connections. But it's still a conversation. It's still you engaging with human beings. And if you can really kind of bring that to the forefront of your mind, that's going to really help you. The numbers, yeah, might be much, much bigger. But if you can talk to and see individuals in that crowd, and what happens for me with big crowds, actually, there's always a few faces when you look around that somehow make you feel less nervous. There's always someone. Now, don't focus too much on that person in the crowd, because that could get a bit strange. But feel confident to look around. There's always someone really engaged over here, someone really engaged over here, that you find this weird stranger comfort in. And it always happens. I've never had an occasion where it hasn't happened. Even with really tough teenage crowds that you can tell that just don't want to be there, you always find someone to make that, whew, yeah, cool. And focus on that feeling that you get when those nerves are taking over. Because then you can start to think, how do I turn crowds into conversations? How do I get people feeling like I've looked around enough times that I'm speaking to all of them individually? And then if you're delivering to one person, obviously you're going to make that eye contact with just them, and you can be able to directly talk with them. In terms of audience participation, now really focusing on kind of face-to-face in the room style presentations here, on that previous note. But participation can come in a number of ways. And however you decide to participate, make sure it's consistent throughout your whole presentation. An example, this presentation, we've got the chat. We've continued to communicate in the same way. When people participate with you, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to return that interaction. Don't be afraid to smile at things that people put, like the emojis, for example. Someone put a little frog emoji. Don't be afraid to be human. So that's the first point. Participation is important. Don't talk at them non-stop. And this relates back to what we were talking about, having too many slides. If you've got too much to cover, there's no space for you to take a breath. Questions? When people ask questions of you, thanks so much for your question. Thank you for engaging with us. Yeah, absolutely. And follow up, which relates to the listening, especially the actively listening. If someone answers one of your questions, so for example, it could be a very beginning question. Where are you signing in from today? Why are you here? What's your goal of this presentation? If they say to you, and a couple of you said, I already deliver presentations, I'm looking for a little bit of a insight into improving, I'm at uni, I'm a student, can you remember some of those things? Can you remember some of them? to bring back round and make the rest of the presentation as relevant as possible. And a really good comment coming through there. The worst thing is if I don't know the answer to a question. Lucy, I feel you. I get this all the time, literally all the time. We can't know everything, right? We're not human dictionaries. We're not human Google search engines. And even on a topic that we know really well, sometimes the worst thing we can do, first of all, to that is make the answer up. But have practice saying, I don't have those stats to hand at the moment, or actually, do you know what, at this point my brain's not coming up with the answer. If it's in there and I remember, I'll come back to you. If not, let's connect after the presentation, we'll find the answer together. Practice really being able to politely say, you know what, I actually don't know that right now. And actually the focus, sometimes the questions that we don't know the answers to are actually not relevant to what we're talking about. So it's, again, that confidence to go, I'm going to park that question. I will come back to you. Let's connect via this, and we'll have a chat afterwards. Because that takes the pressure off you as well. And actually makes you look so much more confident, because you're going to talk to that person about that specific thing later down the line. Content overload is really important. Everything you say, make sure it's got value, make sure it's got focus, and make sure you're taking advantage of pauses, especially when you ask questions. What some people do is ask a question, the nerves panic, the panic kicks in. Oh, nobody's answering me, nobody's in the chat, and we panic, and then we just answer the question, right? We just fill it in ourselves. But actually, think, when someone asks you a question, do you know the answer straight away? No, we don't. And if you add a virtual environment to that, people actually might be slower at typing than you are at thinking. That happens, absolutely. Maybe they've got you propped up somewhere watching you, and they're doing something else, and it's going to take them a little bit of time, like, oh, I want to get involved in that. So pause, take a breath. It allows you to do a few things, right? It allows you to think about what's next, but it also allows your audience to answer and actually get in touch with you. So take advantage of those pauses. Make sure you give yourself that valuable space to think, especially when you're nervous. Now we've got a few minutes left, and the final things I want to cover are our voice and our body language. Your voice is a really powerful tool, and depending on the situation that you're in, you're going to use it in different ways. Volume. You're going to tailor your volume depending on the room you're in, the group size you've got. You know, if you're one-to-one, you're not going to be delivering like I'm a presentation to 100 people. It's not going to happen, right? You're going to have a conversation. Style, again, I said this before, from my personal experience, my style is very animated. My style's very colloquial, very conversational. And actually, sometimes I have to adapt that style to suit a certain audience, to suit a certain subject. Sometimes I have some subjects that I deliver on that are a little bit more serious, and cracking jokes and being overly animated doesn't suit what I'm delivering. So be conscious of that. Start to think about, how can I adapt my personality, my style that I bring to delivery to suit my audience, which comes back to the marketing, right? Understanding your audience and knowing exactly what they want from you. Tone. How can you make the presentation interesting? Anybody ever been to a presentation where they just read the screen and it's really boring, and you almost can't even understand what they're saying because it's just all at the same level, and you're just like, worst kind of presentation. And it's even worse when people actually do that with no slides. And they're having a conversation with you, and they just can't get any injection of life into their tone. So be conscious of that. Start to think about, how do you use your tone to communicate? And pacing, we've talked about pacing. If you can have a couple of things that we move through faster, and then we slow down to get people thinking at the right time. Cindy, death by PowerPoint, we've all been there, absolutely. And the final point, body language. Gesture, facial expressions, stance, all really, really important. So think about it. Now, if we were in a face-to-face room, I'd get us to do this physically, but behind your computer screen, if I said to you, everyone, sit in your chairs or stand, however you currently are, like you're nervous. A lot of us would look down. We might close our body language. And we sort of feel like we're not confident, right? How can we be confident? Chin up, shoulders back. More of a relaxed, open position with our hands. Smile works really well. Even when you're nervous, if you can smile, it can really help you. So think about your body language. What's it saying when you kind of lean into certain positions? And you might have certain positions that are comfortable positions, and actually that happens. Like at a desk, for example, you might lean and you might do this. I look bored, right? I look like I don't want to be here. So think about what your body is saying when you're delivering. Power poses. Some work, loads of investigations on holding power poses and boosting levels and hormone levels in your body to make you feel stronger and make you feel confident. So next time you're feeling a bit stressed and a bit nervous, can you adopt a power pose? The Wonder Woman is my favorite. For at least 2 minutes, so time yourself and then see how it feels. See how you feel. Maybe do it just for going into work in the morning. See if that works for yourself. Be mindful of your stance. We want to adopt a powerful pose, again with that body language. Movement. If I was sat here today swinging on my chair, I was like, hello everyone, or even worse, dipping out of camera. So distracting. And the same for in person. If you're shuffling on your feet, or you're playing with your hair, all of those movements, try and clock them as nervous tics. And connecting. Make eye contact. We don't want to stare at someone. That would be a bit strange. Make them feel uncomfortable. But, look at people. Give them a smile. Ask direct questions to individual people. That can really, really help. I can see people like, thanks, Margot. So I'm going to come and read that in a second. But to finish up, practice, practice, practice. Remember my example of a violin. You're not going to be good straight away. To wrap up, adapt your audience, think about your voice, consider your body language, and practice your performance. Go prepared. Understand exactly what you want to do. What did Margaret say? I heard someone handle not answering a question. I don't have a view on that at this time, but it's a really interesting question. Thank you for asking it, and just moved on to the next question. Nice, Margot. Yeah. Do you know what? I think even in my level of confidence, I don't know how I would move on like that clearly, but yeah, nice example. I don't have a view on that at this moment. Really great question. Thanks for asking it. So, over you there. I don't know how I'd do that with my style. Such a good example. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Maybe something I have to practice, eh? So I can't see any other questions. So next steps. Thank you so much for engaging with me today. I've gone a few minutes over, so thanks for sticking with me. Reminder on these free Google Career Certificates, really, really great. Make sure you take down this link, goo.com/careercertuk. There's 6 options on there now, and you can see 4 of them on the screen. Absolutely have loved speaking to you today, and I really do hope that anyone that's joined has taken something away of what they might be able to add to their style, or a way of dealing with their nerves, or power poses. Tell me in the chat before you leave me, what is the one thing you've taken away from today that you're going to try and implement into your next presentation? And I'll make sure I read them before I leave, even if I'm not on screen. So other than that, I'm going to wrap up. There's a feedback form we're going to pop into the chat if you've got time. We love to hear your feedback. It's on the screen currently. But other than that, thank you so much. And I hopefully we'll see you in many more Google Digital Garage training sessions in the future. Thank you and goodbye.